All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Most everybody's here and looks like you're, well, got a glass of wine hopefully and something to snack on, right? Great. Quick question. Everybody that's in here's got a pool, right? Okay. Not that you have to, but it kind of goes along with the program. How many have had a pool for 5 years or less? Okay. How many are brand new with a pool? Oh, okay, good, good. How many have had one for maybe 15 years or 20, 25? Oh, you guys ought to be teaching us here. You want to come up and take this from me? What we're going to basically show you tonight are things relative to circulation, filtration, and water chemistry. Our goal is really to try to help you learn so that your pools become easier to take care of. We've got a lot of history and experience here. I've been in the industry for over 30 years. Tom's been doing it for 23 plus years. Everyone behind us has been doing it forever as well. So we've combined all of our knowledge and put it into a format here that we're going to try and get you on step with what we found through all these years has worked not just for us, but for our customers as well that bring their water in and get it tested and ask for our opinion on how to. Circulation is one of the critical parts of any pool. Without it having moving water, you're not moving through the filter, you're not dispersing chemicals. If you have a heater on the pool, of course, it helps to disperse the heat as well. It's important to try and reduce dead spots in the pool as much as you can. Those dead spots are where your bacteria and algae are going to always be harboring and growing. And if you can do some easy things like pointing the return jets down, and if there's one that's near a skimmer, point it away from the skimmer. A lot of people like to have those things pointing up in the air so they can see the water rippling. But the pool really doesn't have any circulation down low, or very little circulation down low. So by pointing them down instead, yeah, you're not going to know when your pump is running by seeing the ripples in the water, but it's going to help get those chemicals and the heat as well pushed downward. And if you direct it towards corners, things where otherwise are dead spots, it's very helpful as well. Another critical thing here is how long you run your pump. You need to run that water through that pool, we like to say at least twice a day. And you're not going to do it if you're not running the pump at least 12 hours a day. So we get a lot of people that come in and their water isn't looking great, and one of the first questions we say is, how long do you run your pump? Oh, I run a lot. I run like 4 or 5 hours a day. 4 or 5 hours on, especially in ground pools, isn't enough. If you ever encounter a pool water that isn't perfect, you should run it 24 hours a day no matter what, because you want to have that water constantly moving, constantly being treated and filtering through. When we tell people that, a lot of people say, well, running my pump 12 hours a day, that costs a lot of money. I'm not going to be holding the ComEd here. And it's true. For most of us, if we run our pump 12 hours a day, that's going to cost us about $100 a month to ComEd. And there's, 24 hours a day, obviously you could be as much as a couple $100 a month. The question is, what are we going to be offset by not doing it? So who here has had your pool turn on you in the summer where it's gotten cloudy or gotten algae in it, things like that? And how much money do you spend fixing that? We love it on one level, but we don't love it because honestly we don't want to have you have those problems. Hi, we're great. So the other aspect of it is, and this year is a perfect example, we had snow just as recent as a week ago maybe. Our season's pretty short, and how many times are you actually in your pool? And if the pool turns on you just prior to one of those times you would have otherwise been in it, if you were to try and run some mental math and say, well, I swim this many times a year, and what do I spend every year maintaining it and everything else, this $100 a month kind of gets minimized by comparison. Talk just briefly about some products we have that help with that electrical cost directly. And the aspect of the use of variable speed pumps in our industry in the last handful of years has been huge. We carry a couple of different pumps by a company called Pentair. And to give you an example of what happens with variable speed technology, this is pulled from Pentair's website. They've got calculators on there. If you were to go to pentairpool.com, and this is in the handouts that we've been passing around as you've been coming in, you can do this yourself, so you can put your pool information in. But for this purpose, I put in a pool 25,000 gallons. Our zip code here, and what this does for us, down over here, if you can see this, and this is in your handout too, we're paying right around 13 cents a kilowatt hour. If you take your total bill from ComEd divided by the total kilowatts, you're gonna be right around 13. I did it on mine over the course of the last 5 months. It came out to 12.7, I think. The zip code in the calculator actually pulls that information for it. If you've got a single speed pump right now, the left-hand side is saying, if you run it 12 hours a day, you're gonna filter all of the water in the pool through the system 2.2 times. And it's gonna cost you, through the course of a 6-month season, is what I've got down here, it's gonna cost you $588 for that 6 months to run it, roughly $100 a month, like we said. The variable speed pump technology allows us to slow this pump down and run it 24 hours a day. And we end up having a logarithmic savings in terms of electricity and costs. So we take your same pool and put it in a 24-hour-a-day circulation with a pump speed that's about half of what every single speed pump spins at. And we actually see that we save $360 in that same 6-month time span. So instead of 588, it actually comes to 227.63, I think is what it says there. And up here, we're getting, is that 2.8 now? Yep. We're getting 2.8 times that pool is turning over. So we're actually filtering it even more than running this pump, and it's saving us money, okay? So if you're thinking in terms of energy conservation and costs, these pumps truly are something that works. And to that point, ComEd started 2 years ago giving rebates, just like they do for inefficient refrigerators, just like they do for smart thermostats. A couple of years ago it was $400, last year it was $300, this year it's down to $275. In other markets, they did this many, many years ago out in California. They started, it was either $800 or $1,000 because their electricity is so expensive out there. And it's about 5 years, as we see in the different parts of the country, and these rebates then dwindle away to nothing.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Are you saying you're gonna run the pool 24 hours a day?
24 hours a day, all summer long.
Okay.
Never turn it off. And in that comparison, like I said, you'll save hundreds. On my pool, if anyone can see up here in the very far right corner, that's my pool up here. It's about 14 years old, 32,000 gallons, about 1,100 square feet surface area. Mickey Mouse is 48 foot wide and about 36 or 38 feet top to bottom. It's a very, very big pool. The first 5-6 years I had single speed pump, and most single speed pumps last anywhere from 5 to 7 years. The motors, the heat that comes off them, it wear and tear, it just destroys them in that amount of time. When that happened, I switched to a variable speed pump. That first summer, I saved $450 on my pump electrical costs, okay? Manufacturer actually gave me a device that I could monitor what the pump was drawing and see the actual kilowatt. The pumps themselves will tell you when they're, well, one of them does anyway, when they're running, how many watts they're drawing. And by comparison, the single speed pumps are around 2,000 watts. My pump runs all summer long, drawing right around 400 watts. Yes?
You put in a variable speed pump for us last year,
Okay.
and I really like it.
Excellent, excellent. There's benefits beyond that. We've got one running in the store right now, just 5-7 feet from me. It runs all year long in the store. It's hooked up to a computer where we can actually plug this information in and show you how it would relate to your pool, and it's real time. It's pumping water. Do you hear it? Ever so slight, right? Your pump in your backyard, if you got a single speed pump, you probably wouldn't have a very good conversation this close to it, right? The other thing is the pump runs cold. The motor is actually a DC motor. The drive unit takes your AC from the house, converts it to DC. That's how they vary the speed. AC power is where the heat comes from that causes these motors to wear out. Because it's DC power, it's cold running. Now we've been using these pumps for, I think, as long as maybe 15 years. we only really used them on very elaborate backyards with a lot of water features for a long time. It allowed us to vary the dynamic of the water feature. We could have waterfalls raging or trickling, we could have jets shooting farther or shorter. To be honest with you, when I put it on my pool and saw what it did for my bill that summer, that's when we started talking to people about, hey, you know what, Pentair's always said that this saves money, but until you kind of realize it firsthand, you don't really think about it. So, at any rate, this year right now, we got $275 from ComEd, and we got two different variable speed pump models from Pentair's. Manufacturer also has rebates as well, $50 on one, $100 on the other. So if you're at all in need of a pump, definitely consider variable speed. There's an argument to be made that even if you have a brand new single speed pump, you could throw it away, because this is one of the few, if not the only things that you'll buy for your pool that pays for itself and then some. The pumps that we put in 15 years ago are still out there running today. Those of you that have had pools for a number of years, you've probably realized what I did, that single speed pump every 6-7 years, you're kind of putting another one in. So in addition to your electrical savings, you're saving that one. So, you know, this pump will pay for itself, depending on the model, in usually 3 or 4 years, pays for itself. And then forevermore, it's money in the bank. Yes?
How much do they cost?
Installed, depending on the model, they are, Steve, do you know off the top of your head?
They range, I would say, from like $1,950 to $2,500, depending on the model, roughly.
And that's before the rebates. And actually, when everyone graduates tonight, you're gonna get a little bit of an offer from us too, to save 10% on installed things and that too, so. Yeah,
Just out of curiosity, for the rebate, does it make a difference who your supplier is or not?
the rebate, no, as far as I know. You know,
You have to receive a bill from ComEd.
I think, yeah, Naperville, I believe, is the only municipality that doesn't receive bills from ComEd.
half of Naperville, right? Is anyone from Naperville here? No? Everywhere else, even if, so your community aggregates, right, and does all this stuff. I live in Manhattan, and when that all happened years ago, they aggregate. The bill still is from ComEd regardless, and as long as your bill is from ComEd, then the 275 is eligible. But yeah, thank you, because Naperville, we did have a couple of customers in Naperville who said, oh, I get it from Naperville Power or something, and that they're not eligible. Okay, moving into filtration a little bit, I'm going to talk just hopefully briefly on microns. Micron is a measurement that's used in our industry relative to filtration and water clarity. And a micron is a millionth of a meter. By comparison, table salt between 90 and 100, air about 70, pollen, depending, anywhere from 10 to 100. Algae, this is one to remember, algae is 5 microns and smaller, okay? And then here, most of us, the 20 microns is really small, so you can see what your naked eye, okay? 20 microns and larger you can see, less than 20 microns you can't. So you really can't see algae in its state like this. It's not until it bunches up and becomes clusters that are larger than 20 microns you begin to see it, okay? A lot of different types of filters. They all should have a pressure gauge on them somewhere, and we want to make sure those gauges work. If your pool's already running, go home, shut it off. Make sure your gauge goes to 0. Turn it back on, make sure it goes up to something, and every one will be different. If your gauge is stuck and doesn't move, you really need to get a new one, because the gauge is going to tell us when we need to do something with that filter. If we don't have a working gauge, then it's all guesswork, and it's going to cause some potential problems. Cartridge filter, a grid DE filter, a flex tube or finger DE filter, and a sand filter. A couple of us, I think, have DE filters tonight. Yes? Cartridge? Sand, anyone? Sand? Okay. The DE filter, grid or finger? You know?
I got
Finger like this guy? The bump handle on it maybe, or is it a grid?
No, I got that one.
The grid? Okay, great. So, sand filters. Remember the microns we were talking about? Sand filters trap particles between 20 and 50 microns in size. They start out clean sand or just after backwashing at 50. The dirtier they get, the smaller particles they trap. So those of us that have sand filters, one issue that we sometimes see people do is they backwash too frequently. And by doing that, they're not trapping the smaller and smaller and smaller particles. The way we know when to backwash on a sand filter is we look at our pressure gauge on the tank. We start the filter off clean and we read that number, whatever that number is, maybe it's 20. We're not gonna backwash until that number increases by somewhere between 8 and 10 pounds. So 20 at a clean, 28 to 30 is when it's dirty and needs to be backwashed. If you do it before that, you're gonna be hovering in a 30 to 50 micron size and your water's just not gonna really get that clarity that you could have otherwise, okay? So 8 to 10 pounds increase on sand. DE filters trap much, much smaller, around 3 microns, very, very small, right? We can't see that. Likewise, pressure gauges on them, we need to backwash and recoat these things with that same 8 to 10 pound increase. The DE filters are great in that they trap really, really small stuff, but they can tend to be very high maintenance too. I don't know if you've encountered that, but the finger type of filter, it's not uncommon in the early spring opening a pool that people need to go out and do something with that filter every 4 or 5 hours. It's a real, they filter great, but there is no getting dirtier does better with DE because it traps such small stuff from the get-go. So once that small stuff is kind of coated, all the inside of it, it's done and it needs to
Did
be
you
cleaned.
just say every time that backwash, I should add earth?
Yes, anytime you backwash, you have to recoat with earth.
Okay.
Okay, and the amount of earth is critical too. Every filter is different, and you need to make sure you're measuring it with something that you know how much earth it is. It used to be back in the day, we all had tin coffee cans in our trucks, right? We'd carry a 2-pound coffee can. Coffee weighs twice as much as DE, so 2-pound can is 1 pound earth. And if you don't put enough earth in, hi guys, how are you? If you don't know, that's fine. Thanks for coming. If you don't put enough earth in, then the fabric ends up filtering, and you can't clean the fabric by backwashing. You can only clean it by disassembling it and going through a cleaning process. If you put too much DE in, it clogs between the grids, between the fingers, and reduces your square footage of filtering area and makes you have short cycles. So it's critical that you're paying attention to the, usually there's a label on it that'll tell you you need 3 pounds or 6 pounds or whatever on the DE. And those of us that have cartridge filters are gonna trap somewhere between 7 and 10 microns in size. It's kind of a sweet spot. It's better than sand in that we're not gonna see those particles, right? So our water's gonna have a better clarity to us. It's not quite as small as DE, but that makes it to be less maintenance for us. And whenever we've gone out and installed our cartridge filters for people that have had the DE, especially the finger filters, they love them because they just, the maintenance is so much less on them. A difference now with cartridge filters, and this is any cartridge filter, whether it's the Pentair brand we sell or Jandy or Hayward or any, is your pressure increase now instead of 8 to 10 is 5 to 7, okay? If we let that thing go more than 7 pounds, what we've found is these filters start to break down. So the filters have bands on them that are glued to the pleats, and these bands keep the pleats separated. And the in and out of each pleat is where the surface area of the filtering occurs. When they operate under high pressure, these filters start to collapse like this and the bands break. And you ultimately end up with significantly reduced filtering capacity because of it. Other things that can happen is the filter can squish this way to where it can actually come out of the manifolds, top or bottom, and then water's just bypassing completely and not filtering at all. We have people that call and say, if my pumps are running great, but I have 0 pressure on my filter. Does the gauge work? Well, yeah, it did when they opened the pool or whatever, and it's because there's no pressure in here. The filter media is what causes the pressure reading, and if it squishes and the water's bypassing, it goes down to 0 or real close to 0. Or they'll say, you know, it usually runs at 15 and I'm reading 3. Okay, that's because your water's not filtering anymore, it's bypassing. So 5 to 7 pounds on cartridge, yes.
Maybe a stupid question, but if you don't chemically clean them, because I've been chemically cleaning them every time, which yes, the bands do break down, so how else do you clean them?
No, you chemically clean it. The chemically cleaning of the filter is not going to damage the bands. chemically cleaning.
So acid cleaning, you're saying?
Well, no, acid, I mean, if you're cleaning with like muriatic acid, that's,
Well, I send them to clean, so they clean them with uric acid, I believe.
depending on where you're sending, if you're sending them to us, we're not.
No, I've not used you, I'm
Okay.
using you this year.
Yeah, muriatic acid is actually a bad thing to clean a filter with. The filter collects deposits of minerals and oils. Muriatic acid, when it comes in contact with oils, turns into a wax, and that wax is then never removed. There isn't anything you can do to get rid of it. So the proper thing to clean it with is a cleansing product. We'll go into some of those later, but acid is used as a last step only if there's scale remaining that the detergent type of cleaners didn't remove. Okay? Yes?
So if you know your gauge is working and it's still at 0, then you need to clean your filters or change them out, right?
Probably, yeah. At that point, odds are very high that the filters are really, really in bad shape.
Okay.
Okay. So the importance of a chemically clean filter, to your point, is, as I just said, you know, the filters are removing pollen, dust, minerals, but they're also removing oil, grease, and other insolubles. And that other insolubles, suntan lotion, body oils, airplane fuel. I mean, you know, there's all kinds of stuff in the air that ends up in our pool. That does not break down unless you chemically clean it. So all types of filters we talked about, whether it's sand, DE, or cartridge, should be chemically cleaned at least once a year. Sometimes, depending on filter size and the size of pool and its environment, you may need to clean it more than once a year. So products that we use here is Filter Cleanse, which Tom will tell you a little bit about.
So what's nice about Filter Cleanse is it has those detergents that Dan was talking about. It's colored purple, and it's colored for a reason. It's to tell how strong the solution is. So you take your cartridge, you hose your cartridges off, and then you want to put them in a garbage can or something that will hold them. Some people only have one single filter, some people have the 4 filters. So you need to have a container that's big enough to house them. And then you pour this product in, you mix it with water until the cartridges are submerged. Now some people only have 5-gallon buckets, so in that case you would just use a smaller quantity of this. But you know how much to use based on when it's staying purple. As soon as you start to lose the color, then you know that you've lost some of the strength. So that'll tell you how much product you need to add with how much water you have put in there. You let this soak, the filters soak in this solution for about 12 hours, and then you pull them back out again and then hose them off. Okay? So great, this is going to be one of your best products to use for your deep cleans at the end of the season or beginning of the season, depending on how you do it.
And you can use it in season 2, it just because of the time it takes. There are other products that'll get you through in a pinch. But the color change is key. It'll go kind of a yellow color, the solution, when it's lost its strength. Take the filter out, just add more Filter Cleanse to that until it comes purple again, and now you can continue on. Okay? So most of us are going to do it in a 5-gallon bucket, maybe a big plastic garbage can, but you're not going to get all 4 filters if you got one of those in there at once. So the color change is really kind of neat. That is one of the products that we use when people bring filters into us, which is something we do to clean. We actually use some stuff that we're not able to sell to you. And if need be, we'll go further and use, you know, the acid to remove scale at the end and things like that. Filter Fresh now is used for another purpose.
This is for those that have sand filters. This is a liquid product, whereas the Filter Cleanse is granular. For those that don't know, I don't think a lot of people do know that you should chemically clean a sand filter once a season, just like you should clean cartridges, because there are all those oils and mineral buildup that does not get removed just by backwashing the filter. So what you should do at the end of each season is you should drain out your pump pot and pour this product directly into that pump pot with the filter on backwash. You skipped a step. You're going to mix this in a 5-gallon bucket of water. You pour that into that pump pot with the lid off, with the filter in the backwash position, and then all the solution then goes into the filter. You shut the pump off as soon as you're done pouring this product in, and as soon as it is done accepting it, and then you shut the pump off for 12 hours. You let this solution sit in the filter, soaking the sand for 12 hours, and then the next day or 12 hours later, you're going to backwash that solution out and that will help remove any oily buildup or mineral deposits that are in the filter. So sand filters is what you're gonna use this on.
Yeah, I don't quite understand, where do you pour it into, because my filter does not have a top.
Sure, so the pump does, the pump lid, you know where there's the basket.
Oh, the
by
basket,
pump.
okay, the
Yep.
basket.
So you're gonna drain the water out that's already in there, just so you don't dilute it any further. And then with, you're gonna turn the pump back on with the lid off, and it's going to suck this product. The impeller's going to push it into the filter, and as soon as you're done pouring, as soon as you have consumed all of that 5-gallon bucket, that's when you immediately shut your pump off, and you allow that product then to sit in the filter for the 12 hours.
Now for the occasion that you might have a cartridge filter or even a DE filter that you want to clean in season and you don't want to go through, you know, the deep clean and the time it takes and so forth, you don't have an extra set of filters to swap with, Power Blue is great. You take those filters out, hose the big debris off, spray it with the Power Blue, let it soak for about 10 minutes, rinse that off, and then you can put those filters back in the cartridge and you'll see another long period of filtering. On the occasion where I've had to clean my filters mid-season, I get 6-8 weeks. It's not as good as a deep clean, but it's better than just rinsing them off. It will break down the oil and the scale and things like that on the filter. With the cartridge filters, a lot of people don't know that truly the filter will do its best job if it's allowed to dry before putting it back in. If the filter's taken out, hosed down, run through some, you know, whatever the cleaning that you're gonna do and put right back in, it'll work, but if you let it dry, the fibers of the filter actually fluff back up. And it gives you a better filtration and a little bit longer filtration. It's on a small level, but it does help to let them dry if you're able to. And then we also have these, they look like Tide Pods, but they're not, so don't go eating them on your way home. The Pleatco, who is one of the leading manufacturers of the actual cartridge itself, came out a couple of years ago with these tablets, one for pools, one for spas, only because pool filters are usually bigger. You basically drop the tablet into a volume of water and drop your cartridge into it and let it do the cleaning for you. It's like the Filter Cleanse kind of product, just in a different kind of packaging. Doesn't give you the color change that the Filter Cleanse does or anything like that, but it's a little more convenient in its size and everything else. Does a good job of cleaning too. People with spas love them a lot. Spa filters are usually like this, and you can put it in a 5-gallon bucket real easy, so they work great. But they will work on pools too. And then, as we've been mentioning, so we also clean filters. If you want to bring your DE or cartridge filter internals to us, don't bring your sand filter. Leave that at home. We'll let you do that. Although, I guess if you could get it here, maybe. Usually they're about 300 pounds or more, so. What we'll do when we get the filters in is we will hose them as well. You probably will do it anyway before you bring them, just you're gonna have to put them in your car with all that good, but we'll hose them down. We'll soak them in the Filter Cleanse solution along with some other products we'll put in there. Then we soak them in clear water. Then after clear water, we soak them in liquid chlorine solution. It doesn't do anything for cleansing, it just makes them a little bit whiter. Filters will never look like they do when they're brand new in that tank bank in the corner after you've used them. But a lot of people think they should. So we put them through the chlorine to brighten them, kind of like putting bleach on your whites in the laundry. It doesn't make them any cleaner, but it makes them whiter. Then we'll soak them in clear water again. And then after that, if they look like they could use another cycle, we'll put them through the cycle a second time. And then we'll have them ready for you. When we close in-ground pools that have cartridge filters or DE filters, we offer that as a service. We'll bring them back at the time of closing. We'll take them out of the filter. You don't have to mess with getting them in your car and all the rest of it. We'll clean them over the winter. We'll deliver them to you in the off season, so you got them for the spring. We'll wrap them in a plastic bag, put them on your front porch, in your shed, in your garage, wherever you want us to put them. So know that these are products that you would use, or if it's easier, you can have us do it, yes.
What do you charge for cleaning filters if you bring them?
If it's a set of 4,
Yeah.
and we're doing it, bring it here and then delivering the clean one, it's $140 for the set. If you were to bring the cartridges to us, it is $30 per cartridge. or 120 for this set. Any questions on any of that? No? Great. Okay, chemical balance. The important proper chemical balance is, one, we don't want the water to be something that's irritating people's eyes, skin, and so forth. And number two, we want to protect that investment that we've got back here. Water chemistry is the leading cause of aging of everything that it comes in contact with and failure of some major components. Water chemistry. Chemical balance, I should say, not water chemistry. Chemical balance, what we're really talking about are these factors here. Total alkalinity, pH, calcium hardness, total dissolved solids, cyanuric acid, which is also referred to as stabilizer, and water temperature to an extent. There's math that can be done that basically take all of these factors, whatever the numbers are in your pool, and if you put them into a formula called the Langmuir Saturation Index, it will give you a number that defines how corrosive or scale forming your water is. It's a very small scale. The balanced aspect of it is a range of negative 0.3 to positive 0.5. So it's a very, very small scale. And all of these factors have different values that they contribute to it. So most of us have tested chlorine and pH, right? Who has ever tested for total alkalinity? A few, good. Who's ever tested for calcium? Who's ever heard of total dissolved solids? We have fewer and fewer hands as we go.
If Leslie Pools test for that, then I had, if they do, that's right.
Okay, good. They might, I would expect they would, I would certainly hope so. So, there are a lot of ways you can test the water. We have different products, we have test strips. We have a test 3 that'll give you basically your chlorine, your alkalinity, and pH. Test strips are pretty easy, you dip them in the water, certain amount of time. Every test strip is different, so make sure you read the label. Some will say 2 seconds, some will say 15 seconds. Read the label, you pull it out, you compare it to a color comparator on the bottle, and you get your numbers. Then we can go into a test 6, which will actually give us even more. It'll give us our hardness and our stabilizer level, as well as a total chlorine versus free chlorine reading. Okay. Test strips are very easy. One of the things that I recommend homeowners use because it is easy, and anything easy you're more likely to do, right? If you want to go home with a $100 drop test kit, odds are you'll think it's really cool for the first month, and then it'll sit on the shelf in the garage and you won't touch it again. Test strips are easy. And there are specialty test strips, so if anyone has a salt chlorine generator and a salt pool, there are test strips for that. Does anyone here use a biclonite, Aquasil or soft one? No? Okay. We get in the drop kits. There are basic drop kits that typically you're going to be dealing with just chlorine and pH. That's all you're going to get out of it. In these kits, it's an OTO test for testing the chlorine. Is anyone here from a commercial property tonight? No? Okay. Commercial pools in the state of Illinois are required to use a DPD test kit. DPD reagents are more reliable than OTO. They're also a little more money. So most people will gravitate towards the $5 to $10 test kits because they feel they're, what's the difference between that and a $30 test kit? Well, usually the difference in price is changing us from OTO to DPD, which is giving us more information. In a basic DPD kit, we're going to get our free chlorine, which is a good chlorine. It's also going to let us test our total chlorine so we can know if there's any combined chlorine in the water, which we'll talk about a little later. In the pH side, we're not only going to get a pH test, but if our pH is high, it's going to give us another reagent we can add to that sample to see how high. And then there are charts in books that will tell you, based on your water volume, how much of what product you need to add to bring it up or down based on how much change you require to get you to a balanced pH level. Okay, so that's a step up. And we can go into, these are kits that our service techs carry with them, although now we're also using mobile spin labs in the field, which is the same technology we use in the store. It's all stored in a cloud, in a database, so if our tech is in your backyard testing your water, and you come in the store that afternoon with water, the people in the store have the same information that that tech gave, and vice versa. So it's a great way for us to be able to provide better service. This kit not only does all the chlorine pH I talked about, it's going to do total alkalinity, calcium, cyanuric acid, you can do salt tests. This little spin chart is actually a Langmuir index that you can plug your numbers in and turn it, and it will tell you how balanced your water truly is. Whatever of any of that you use something, okay? If you're not gonna test the water, you're gonna end up with problems. And all too often, people just use their eyes or their nose and say, water looks clear. And we'll talk in a minute about why water can look really clear, but be a real problem. Again, make sure you follow directions on your strips. They do vary, so the package you bought today may not be the same instructions as what you were used to. Test strips have expiration dates on them. Every bottle is stamped with them. Don't use them past their date. They will give you wrong information. Your drop reagents, you should replace those every spring. They also have a shelf life, and although they don't have expiration dates on them, they're relatively inexpensive. Probably one of the least expensive things you'll buy for your pool, and it's one of the most important things to do is test your water to make sure it's right. The color comparators that you've got, if you're replacing reagents year after year after year, and this is fading or the clear vials are getting discolored, you probably just want to get rid of it, get a whole new kit, because you're not going to be able to tell the accuracy of those readings. So replace any of those. High chlorine, when you're testing, if your chlorine is at 5 or above, you basically need to forget about all the rest of the tests, because that high chlorine level will bleach out, or can bleach out, all of the other test indicators. It will make pH look normal or low when it's either normal or high. It'll make alkalinity look lower than it actually is. So if you test and you see a high chlorine reading, you really can't do anything beyond that. You can bring water to us, we can compensate, and we do compensate for that as soon as the chlorine is detected as being high, and we'll almost always, although there's limits even to what we or any professional pool store can do to that point, but we'll be able to tell you your pH, alkalinity, all these other numbers if you have a chlorine of 10 or a chlorine of 8.
You remember we test how often?
If everything is going well, once a week, okay? We always recommend that people bring water in here to check what you're doing at least, well, as often as you can, honestly. I mean, I don't even want to say at least every other week, because, you know, sometimes bad things will happen, and we'll talk about that change in less than a week, what's going on in our backyard. Using a drop kit, when you're holding those bottles, don't hold them like this, hold them vertically. The droplet size is not true unless it's perfectly up and down. It goes back to our chemistry days, those of us that remember that, but the droplets are smaller as the bottle's underneath, so hold vertical. And, whoops, and the light source, all too often we see people grab the thing and hold it up like this to the sky, or to the sun, or to a light, and that will always give you bad readings. You want your light source to be behind you. Ideally, hold something, if you've got something white you can put behind it, or hold it if your deck is just sort of a neutral color, that'll work usually. But have your light source behind you as you're looking at the vial. Okay?
Is that page in this book?
I believe it is.
It's right here.
And then, of course, like we said, you bring water into us, you bring it to us every day, you bring it to us twice a day. You can drop it off on your way to work and get your results on your way home. You know, use us. We're here. We don't charge for that. It's a free service that we think is important. And in your bags tonight, everybody should have a water bottle. So fill that thing up. If you bring water into us, don't take water from the surface. turn that bottle upside down and reach down as far as you can and turn it up and take the sample. The surface, the top inch or so of water is never gonna give you a true reading of anything. The chemical distribution up in that level is almost non-existent, and it is also where all of the contamination happens. So it's gonna be inaccurate, so as deep as you can. Foot down, 18 inches down. Dive in and get it from 3 feet down. So the first factor that we're gonna talk about here is total alkalinity. Total alkalinity is a buffer for pH. Who has a hard time keeping their pH in line? Okay. So there are a lot of things that, everything actually that isn't going on in a swimming pool affects pH. But one of the biggest reasons we see pH be a problem for people is because they don't know about alkalinity or they aren't addressing alkalinity. Alkalinity, when kept in range, keeps the pH from fluctuating greatly from the outside influences, okay? When alkalinity is, well, I'll get into that in a minute, but everything that comes into play in a pool is gonna affect, like I said, that pH. People in the pool, rain, yes?
I was gonna say Lake Michigan water is average, 7.6.
Yeah,
Okay.
Lake Michigan's pretty neutral.
Right, it's pretty neutral, so, I mean, it depends what's going on temperature-wise with your pool and, like you said, circulation and all of that, whether you get the balance.
Yeah.
Once you get the balance, and then calcium also is another factor that affects the pH.
Well, the calcium doesn't actually affect pH, but it's part of the overall saturation index that
Right.
determines whether it's acidic or basic. But
Right.
calcium doesn't have a bearing on whether pH changes. But the alkalinity certainly is going to keep it in line. If you get your alkalinity right, your pH is much more stable.
The last couple of years, I've had pretty good success.
Good, that's great. When your alkalinity is high, some things that you can have happen is you can have scale form on the pool itself or inside of some of your equipment. The pH tends to always drift up. So, if your alkalinity is always around 250, it's gonna cause your pH to constantly be dragged up. And you'll add something to combat the pH to get it down, but shortly it's right back up again. And you just keep kind of going crazy. Why? And then ultimately people unfortunately often say, I can't get it down, I'm not gonna worry about it. It's just not in it. And then other problems form. And the pool can also be cloudy and hazy. If the alkalinity is too low, you can have corrosion occur on plaster or paint finishes, on the metals that are inside our heaters and our pumps, or in our pools. Some pools have metal components to them in the walls and things like that. pH bounce is one of the big ones. So you have a low alkalinity, but you don't recognize that, and you test your water and your pH is at maybe 7, and you know you need to be at 7.5. So you read the bottle and it says add so much of this, and I should see a change from 7 to 7.5. So you put that much in, and a day later you test it and you're up over 8. Well, what happened? Did I goof? Did I put too much in? Is my pool not as big as I thought? How did that happen? It happened because the pH is bouncing. Because the alkalinity isn't there to help stabilize it, those small little changes become big. And likewise on the downside, you'll have the same thing. Our rain, we'll talk about here in a minute, is acidic. And the effect of the acidic rain on a pH that's low, you could get it up to normal, and then a little bit of rain, a 1/4 inch of rain, and all of a sudden it's gonna bottom out. So again, alkalinity is the primary thing we look at once a pool is cleared. Initially, people in the spring will put in chlorine and algaecide to get it going. And then within 36, 48 hours of filtering, they'll start looking at the water chemistry to see what do I need to do to dial it in. And that's when we're gonna start looking here at alkalinity as the primary thing. Because if we can't get the alkalinity right, we're gonna have a heck of a time helping you get the pH.
I've been told when your alkalinity is high, it's bad for your heater coils. Is that accurate, or?
It is, and it's really a matter of, again, that saturation index and the other factors that come into play, because the alkalinity causes the pH to go up, and that pH causes scale to precipitate out of the water and things like that. Now, any of you go home and look at your test kits, even the test kits we've got out here tonight, and you'll see certain ranges on stuff. And those ranges, in every case they're good, but we've learned in our environment around Chicagoland, Southwest side specifically, that we can tweak those numbers a little bit, okay? So normally alkalinity, your test kit's gonna say between 80 and 120. We know in our environment that we can see in chlorine pools around us, alkalinity of 150 is not gonna cause us a problem. And that has to do with the overall saturation index that I keep referring to. And, you know, our experience with the water in this area, you go to different parts of the country, water has different things going on. But anyway, this page should be in your handout, and if you refer to this, you know, if you can get it down to 100, great. But if you have a hard time and you're at like 140, you're probably fine, you know. If you're really wondering, bring some water in and let us check it, and we'll put it through the saturation index and tell you, yeah, you're good.
I remember mine's been as high as 190 possible.
Yeah, and 190's up there. Ours out of the we're on a well here, and it comes out of the well, and it's
Every bit of 300 to 400.
yeah, it's real high.
I got Frankfurt water, so it's pretty good.
Yeah, is that they mix, right?
Delaware, I'm not sure, yeah, I believe so.
I think they mix Chicago with well.
Yeah, I think that's one of the
Yeah. So if alkalinity is low, we've got a product called Alkalinity Plus that you're gonna put right into the pool water. You'll see this a lot tonight. Do not premix. Okay, our chemicals are not designed to be premixed. You're gonna broadcast it right into the pool. Ideally, if you can get this over the deep end when you're doing it, it's a little bit better. But you're gonna put it right in the pool. You're gonna add it. You're gonna circulate for a dozen hours or 24 hours, and then you're gonna test again and see if you need more. It's pretty much the way it goes. Okay. There are some, when people come in and have had extreme cases, extreme problems, we give them more detailed instructions than this, but hopefully you guys never run into that. If you have in the past, hopefully you won't in the future. Decreasing alkalinity, if your alkalinity is ever high, you have to use muriatic acid. It's the only thing that's gonna bring it down. Muriatic acid is an acid. If you have not used it and you go to use it, you want to put on your Sunday best, right? Because it's going to splash up on you and you'll look like, you know, a Dalmatian full of holes, right? If you spill it on the deck, it'll etch the deck. Acid, it etches, it cleans is what it does, but it's going to look like a stain because that part of the deck is going to look kind of cleaned up versus everything else. So just be careful with it. When you open the bottle, don't do it in a shed and don't be right over it because you can have fumes, especially in the heat of the summer. That bottle might have a little bit of pressure even, you know, when you open it and the fumes will come out and it'll take your breath away. Again, if you can pour it in the deepest part of the pool, same kind of stuff. You're never gonna pre-mix this. You're not gonna dilute it with something or pour it straight in the pool. Any questions on alkalinity? Yes.
Just a quick question, if you're doing muriatic acid, then you just can put it in the deep end, you don't have to bother putting it all over?
Right, yeah. Yeah, you pour it in and the liquid chemicals disperse very readily. Powdered chemicals like the Alkalinity Plus, if you see it kind of settle to the bottom, it's not a bad idea to take a brush and just stir it up a little bit to help it dissolve. Okay, on the pH, second most important factor of the pool. Notice we're not even talking about chlorine yet, but that's usually what everybody is always concerned about. Do I have enough chlorine in the pool? So pH is a measure of how acid or base the water is. In nature, we probably all remember this from our school, 7.0 is neutral, right? Acidic things, milk, that one always, you know, I always thought milk was basic, right? Got an upset stomach, drink some milk. Now it's slightly acidic. Rain, that we said, is acidic. Vinegar, urine, right? If you happen to have a bunch of kids in the pool and they're not getting out enough, that's gonna do some acidic things to your pool. Human tears are ever so slightly basic. Liquid bleach or liquid chlorine is basic. Our human tears between 7.3, 7.4. So where do you think a good place to keep your pH would be? Right around that number, right? It's going to be the most comforting to our bodies. What raises pH? This one a lot of people don't realize, algae growth. Because algae is a plant, and because the plants give off gases. Those gases change the pH in the pool and cause it to go up. Do any of us have a spa? Okay, so when you have air coming into the spa, either through an air blower or through the jets, you know, when they're running and you've maybe got valves you can open and let air in, that air will cause the pH to go up. If it's a self-contained spa like this unit over here, not associated with the pool, not a bad idea when you're done using it to close down any air valves you have. So while it's just doing its filtering, you're not constantly increasing pH. Spas tend to have a problem with high pH anyway. So if we cut the air down, it'll help to prevent that contributing to it. Liquid chlorine. Some people use nothing but liquid chlorine to treat their pool. Commercial pools do it a lot. There are people that do it, and that use of that product will cause the pH to go up. The aspect of the salt chlorine generators, who's heard of salt chlorine generators? Anyone?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, Mary, you got one. I've got one on my pool. I've had 8 years. I've had salt chlorine, and I would never go back. But the salt chlorine systems essentially produce liquid chlorine, basically. So as a result, the pH is going up, and we want to make sure we're always paying attention to that and lowering it. And Endure is a product we'll talk about a little bit later that also has a pH factor when it's introduced. What lowers pH? Rain. Rain is a huge one. Of course, our decreasers, obviously, that's why we're using them in the pool. This one, though, tablet and stick chlorine. Who uses tablets or sticks for chlorine? So those have very, very low pH, and as we use them, the pH is constantly going down. And if you're not watching that and bringing it up, inevitably, the first thing to go is the heat exchanger in your heater springs a leak, and you got basically you're buying a new heater because replacing an exchanger costs about half of what a new heater does, and that water's done damage to the electronics and such that, you know, it's unless the heater is a year or maybe too old, it really is something that just destroys it and you throw it away and buy a new one. So if you're using tablets and sticks, make sure you're really, really paying attention to it. Granular chlorine has an effect too, not quite as great, but it also has a downward effect. So we talked about acid rain. Tom Skilling did a study some number of years ago that I found, and out in Streamwood, he found where the national average, the pH nationally averages about 6. We're worse here. June and August being the most acidic at about 4.65. So imagine if we get an inch of rain, what that does to the pH in your pool. I mean, an inch of rain in most pools is hundreds of gallons, right? And we're talking about adding uric acid to a pool. We usually talk about ounces or pints, maybe quarts. Acid rain can add, you know, an inch of rain in some pools could be as much as 300, 400, 500 gallons or more. In my pool, it's more. And that's going to have a huge downward effect on pH. Throughout the year, the averages, he said, somewhere between 4.8 and 5.7. But this is something that you really want to be aware of. So what happens when the pH is low? The water becomes corrosive, and it's going to eat away at plaster finishes. It's going to eat away at metals. It's going to definitely have the ability of causing heaters to leak. Going to cause bather discomfort. Vinyl liners can be wrecked. A lot of people think vinyl liners are like chemicals can't hurt them because of what they are, but it's far from the truth. Vinyl liners can be wrecked by water chemistry very readily. And if the pH is too high, we get scale forming, which is also a leading cause of leaks in heaters for an opposite reason from being eaten away. Again, bather discomfort. And this one here, the chlorine's ability to sanitize is greatly reduced, and that's something a lot of people don't realize as well. This chart shows us that a small increase in pH from 7.8 to 8.0 reduces the effectiveness of chlorine by 20%. So the more acidic a pool is, the more reactive the chlorine is, the better job the chlorine does. The more basic a pool is, the less reactive it is, and the less potential it has to actually disinfect. Well, to that point, at a pH of 6, when we have chlorine in a pool, and we want to keep our chlorine between 2 and 4 parts per million, okay? So if we've got 4 parts per million of chlorine in our pool, and we have a pH at 6, almost all of that 4 parts, almost 100% of it, is sanitizing for us. The problem is, your pool's not gonna last real long. You're gonna be eating away everything, including yourself if you go into it. The reason we target 7.5 as being ideal is because of the acidity, because of the basicness if we go above. At a 7.5, our chlorine is 50% reactive. So that reading of 4 parts per million is working like 2. If we go up to 8.0, we're down to 1/5 of that. So our 4 parts per million is less than 1 part per million. You know, you're getting into like nothing land. So incrementally, little changes in pH up and down change the ability of the pool to disinfect because of the chlorine's reaction to it. Does that make sense? Help to maybe.
Check pH.
Yeah, 7.5 is where you want to be, yeah. So again, with the range, you're going to get your test kit out and you're going to see it's got a range of 7.2 to 7.8 on it, okay? So for me, every Sunday is my day with my pool. I go out and I test my water and I add things and I empty baskets and clean things. Your test kit says 7.2 to 7.8. So if I go out on Sunday and test it and it's at 7.2, my test kit says that's okay, right? So I'm not going to do anything because it's okay. Okay is okay. Monday and Tuesday we get rain all day. And maybe I've gotten a 1/2 inch or 1 inch of rain in the pool. Well, we just talked about what rain does, right? My pool day is Sunday. So what's happening Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday before I get back out there on Sunday? That water's acidic and damaging and causing problems in the pool. So by changing our scale from 7.2 to 7.8 to 7.4 to 7.6, now you know when you see it at 7.2 to react to it and do something. So if your day is Sunday like me and you test 7.2, oh, all seasons at pool school said it's got to be 7.4, I need to add something to bring that up. Okay, yes?
Do we need to be checking it more frequently depending on the amount of people that are using the pool?
Yeah, for sure.
Because like ours is at a condo complex, so there's like 8 buildings. So should I do, like how many times a week would you do?
Well, if it's a condo complex, by law, it needs to be tested twice a day in both the shallow and the deep, so total of 4 tests, morning and afternoon. And you need to use the DPD test kit that we talked about, and those results need to actually be charted. The state requires you to fill out, they've got them available on the state website that you can download and print out. And if a state health inspector comes, they will ask to see that. And if commercial property can't produce it, the state inspector can shut you down for that. So you want to make sure that you're following all the guidelines that the health department has for that. Makes once a week seem easy, doesn't it? So pretty much again, 7.4 to 7.6, you kind of get why we're targeting that. Important. pH is a logarithmic scale. 6.0 is 10 times more acidic than 7. 5.0 is 10 times more acidic than 6, or 100 times more acidic than 7. We get a lot of people saying, well, it was only off by a little bit. You know, the range is 7.2 to 7.8, I'm only at 6.8. That's not that far off. Well, it is, because that water is now, 10 or 100 times more damaging than it was at a normal level. So, right is right and wrong is wrong also. So for balancing pH, again, first, we want to make sure your alkalinity is balanced. And then we've got powders, pH plus, pH minus. If your pH is too high, you're going to have pH minus. If you want to use a powder instead of muriatic acid, also lowers pH. If it's too low, you're going to have pH plus. So those of us that are using sticks and tablets need to always have pH plus at home, because you're going to be adding it probably weekly, really, to keep that pH in line, keep your pool safe and in good shape. Those of us that are using liquid chlorine or salt systems are probably always going to have some muriatic acid at home that we're going to be adding every week to combat that. Any of these products, you basically add it, you're going to run the pump again 10, 12 hours, maybe till the next day, and then test it and see where you're at and add some more. You don't want to overdo it with any of these products. You know, you don't want to be bouncing back and forth. It's better to small steps and small increments. The labels all tell you what to do, and if you follow that, you'll be fine. Or if you bring water to us, we're gonna print out a thing and tell you what we want you to do. Any questions on pH?
So if you have acidic in a bind, do you use the baking soda to bring up the pH, or no? That's like, yeah.
Now, baking soda, well, if baking soda is gonna have an effect on alkalinity, not on pH. Okay. Sodium bicarbonate will raise alkalinity. That's essentially what the alkalinity plus is. Sodium carbonate is pH increaser. That's not baking soda. It's a different thing. Okay. Now, oftentimes if pH is low, in an extreme case, alkalinity is also low, because the way muriatic acid lowers pH and alkalinity. If the pool is low in pH, it's dragging the alkalinity down because of it, in extreme cases. And in those cases, we have you add alkalinity increaser, and if we get into needing large volumes, you know, we have some people that need 50, 60, 75 pounds of alkalinity increaser because it's so bad. We actually have it in 50-pound bags that has Arm & Hammer on it, and we tell them to break it into thirds and follow all these other instructions to get that alkalinity up as fast as they can. Okay, calcium hardness. Now this is the one that not a lot of hands went up and said, yeah, I get what that is. It's a level of calcium and magnesium that's dissolved in the water. So water is a solvent that will dissolve anything. Doesn't matter what it is. Water, if given time, will dissolve anything. And in nature, water is always looking to have a mineral content to it. And the calcium and magnesium are that mineral content. Depending on your pool type, we've got different ranges here of where we want your calcium level to be. We steal some soft and hard terminology from the water treatment facilities and that industry where low calcium is soft, high calcium is hard. If you have a calcium level that's too high in the pool, you can get scale to form, and the water can be cloudy. And if it's too low, this is where water wants to have a certain mineral content to it. So if your calcium level is too low, even if your pH is right, the water can be aggressive and strip away minerals from things like your metals and your plasters and even your paints, because the water wants to have a mineral content. And if it's too soft, it's going to go look for that mineral somewhere. And to that point, how many have Chicago water? Probably most of us, right? Water out of your tap has a calcium hardness level right around 100, okay? Yours will be a little different because of, I think, Frankfurt is mixing, but for the rest that are just all Chicago water. So if we go back to wanting it to be somewhere in the 2 to 250 range, what does that tell us if we got Chicago water? We need to do something to bring that up, right? Calcium hardness is a factor that once you make it right, it doesn't change on its own. It's not going to go away. The only way it goes away is if the pool is diluted by water of a lower level. So if you lower the water for winterizing and then fill it back up with your hose, or if it's a concrete pool and you let Mother Nature fill it back up, that water has no calcium in it or low calcium in it, so that'll change your calcium level. But through the course of the season, you're really not going to see a fluctuation. Tremendous amount of rain may have a factor, but that's usually pretty minor. So once your calcium is brought up in level, it doesn't cause you to have to constantly battle it, okay? When we increase calcium, we have the calcium plus that we're going to be throwing into the water. Just a note, just calcium, the water doesn't want to absorb it real fast. So if we have to add more than 50 parts per million at a time, we want to break that dosage into thirds and do it over 4 or 6 hours with the pump running to let it slowly absorb it. All at once, you'll end up with that stuff laying on the bottom of the pool. It'll form kind of a scaly, hard, chunky thing that's not easy to break down. So you're probably not going to test for this at home. You're probably not. You're probably going to go to, hopefully us, but some professional that's going to tell you what to do. And just remember this, because that's something that a lot of places may or may not suggest. They may say, hey, you know what, you need to bring this up by 75 parts, take this home and throw it in, and you'll be tearing your hair out trying to get it off the floor of your pool the next day because it's just stuck there. Decreasing and controlling, I just said you can't get rid of it, right? It doesn't go away. So if the calcium level is too high, what do you do about it? Well, you could drain portions of the water and have water trucked in maybe from a lower source. Our calcium in here is 400?
Around 400, 300, 400.
Out of our well, our calcium's 300 to 400. So on our vinyl display pool over there, or in our spas where we want to have it around 200, we got a problem. And what are we going to do about it? Well, remember, this is one factor in that whole saturation index. So when people bring water to us, if we see that they have a high calcium level and there's nothing they can do to reduce it by draining and filling with a lower content effectively, we're going to tweak the other numbers to make sure your saturation index is still balanced. If you have high calcium, you run your pH a little bit on the lower side and it offsets the saturation index to keep you in the middle of that barometer to where you're not going to have problems. It's a lot of math and a lot of stuff that trying to do on your own is something I don't do it myself, to be honest with you. I bring water in here a couple times a month and have them run through the lab. I test it every Sunday, but I still bring it in and have it tested here so that I get the fully accurate results. I get the saturation index information. I know I'm good. I'm good place to be. When we have high calcium, we talked about scale forming and some of these problems. So if we have a high calcium level, we've got products that are used to prevent those scale buildups. And Sequosol, Tom, can you agree?
Sure. So what this is going to do is it's going to put a protective coating around any mineral that's in the water. So whether it's calcium or if it's copper, iron, anything that could be in the water metal-wise or mineral-wise, it's going to protect it from latching on to your surface or to your pool heater, help keeping it in solution. That's what we wanted. That's the only way we can control calcium hardness is by keeping it in solution and preventing it from coming out of solution and giving us that white scaly buildup along the water line, or by shortening the life of our pool heaters because the internals become coated in minerals. So this is something that you're going to add on a weekly basis if you do have well water, and help, like I said, keep it in solution and keep it protected from latching on.
These products, Sequosol as well as this next one, the magenta stuff, they're considered sequestering agents. They sequester the minerals, prevent them, as Tom said, from precipitating out in solid form on a molecular level. They'll surround the calcium in the water molecularly with a polymer that prevents it from being able to oxidize and discolor. So if you've got iron in your water, it's not going to stain. If you've got copper in the water, magnesium in the water, it's not going to stain. It's completely surrounded by a polymer and it can't. We use the magenta stuff is one that we've really been going to a lot. It's everyone has their own personal preference. It's my personal preference. I'm in Manhattan. I've got a city well water. I don't have Chicago water at all, and I do have a higher calcium level than I would like. And there is a little bit of iron, a little bit of magnesium in the water, and I can't do anything about it. And I use the magenta stuff routinely every week just to keep that going. Those of us with salt systems, any of these sequestering agents will also help prevent scaling in the salt cells that produce the chlorine for us and extend the cell life as a result. Questions on calcium? No? Crystal clear, right? TDS, total dissolved solids, is the amount of residue that would remain if you were to boil all the water out of your pool. There's solid matter in water, and if you were to boil it all out, you would see it. Your pots over time and pans at home end up with a white sort of a buildup on them. It's really the result of that. It's boiling the water away and leaving behind the solid matter. TDS cannot be removed, just like calcium. It's something that introduces a water line buildup. It makes can make the water cloudy, makes chemicals difficult to do their job, and it is increasing always because of everything we're putting in the pool. all of these products we're talking about, the chlorine that we put in the pool, all of it leaves behind some soluble solid matter. Even us in the pool swimming and using it will leave behind some soluble solid matter. At a certain point, this TDS level becomes so high we have to do something about it. And a great analogy years ago, a chemist told me was, if I'm in my pool by myself and I want to swim to the other end and back, I can do it pretty readily. If I put all of you in the pool with me and I want to do it, I'm going to be bouncing off of you on my way there and back, right? That's kind of TDS in the pool. It's going to inhibit the chemicals movement molecularly through the pool to be able to effectively get a hold of and sanitize the contaminants. And what we found is a number that is 2,000 parts per million above your fill water is the threshold at which, if it goes more than that, we need to do something about it. So all water has solid matter in it. If you brought in water out of your hose, out of your tap, and we tested it, there would be a TDS level. Usually 300 to 500 in Chicago water. So in Chicago water, we look for readings to be up over 2,500, 2,000 parts more than that before we worry about it. Now, TDS, when you bring water in here, we're not testing that automatically. TDS is kind of like the bottom of the laundry list, and there's no reason to look at it unless everything else is perfect and you're having water issues, water quality issues. My pool's cloudy, can't get it to clear up, my filter's good, my chemicals, everything else we talked about are good. At that point, it's an electronic testing device that we run the water through to tell us the TDS level. And if we find it's high, then the only thing you can do is drain some water out and put good water in to offset it. So just know there's something else out there that can affect your water. If you think everything else is right and you're having problems, good time to bring some water in and have it checked out. Any questions on TDS? Okay, so what happens if we don't have our water balanced? So this is the end of a heat exchanger. Copper tubes are flared through a steel plate. The water passes through. There are usually 9 or 10 of these tubes in a heat exchanger. And if we have low pH alkalinity or calcium, see how these tubes get dissolved, get eaten away? Even to the extent that they'll get eaten back past the steel plate, and at that point, your heater's shot. The exchanger's leaking. You can also have, if you ever look at the heat exchanger copper tubes, there are fins that are cut into the copper. So they start out with a copper tube of a certain thickness, and they run it through a machine that cuts into it and creates fins. That way the heat is better absorbed into the water. It's for transference purpose. Everywhere that fin comes in contact with the copper is a slightly thinner place on that tube and is highly susceptible to bad water eating through there. So if we don't see an exchanger eaten away like this bottom right-hand picture that's leaking, if it's leaking, sometimes we see pinholes throughout the exchanger everywhere and water spraying kind of like a sprinkler inside of it. And at that point, like I said, new heat exchanger, half the cost of a heater. If it's been leaking for any time, your electronic controls have been compromised. We go and put a new exchanger in, and within a month it quits working because one of those controls that was compromised finally failed. And it's just a snowball, and that's why we basically suggest, unless it's really a brand new heater, that you go to replacing it instead. I've seen damage like this on heaters that are 3-4 days old. Okay. To the extent now that, I've been doing this over 30 years, if we put a heater in, we test the pool water before we do it. Because of that, because we got caught up in, someone has us put a new heater in, and we put it in, and 3-4 days later it was leaking, and it's a bad heater. I just paid you $3,500 or whatever for this heater, and it's leaking, it's brand new, and then we go out and then we find that their water's bad. So we've kind of changed our systems that we do that. We test water when we open a pool. We take the cover off, we test the water. There's nothing been done to it yet, but we test it because we want to know the environment that it's coming out of. So that if we see something through the opening or hear of something shortly after, that we might have a clue as to what may have happened in the 3, 4, 6 months that it was closed that led to that. We also test water when we close pools for the same reason. at closing, if we find pools that are chemically imbalanced, when we go to close it, our guys stop and say, you know what? We really suggest you fix this and have us come back and close it at a later date. Because if we close it all up, yeah, your equipment's not touching it, but that liner, the plaster, the paint, everything inside the pool, the cover on top of it is gonna be affected by that water balance, so, anyway, damage. This is a vinyl liner, and this is not wrinkles because the liner was too big and it was installed wrong, or that it got water underneath it. These type of wrinkles that are puckers that almost look like an old orange that you left sitting out too long are caused by low pH and alkalinity. The vinyl composition, the DNA of the vinyl, if you will, changes in that environment, and it loses its memory. It becomes absorbent like a sponge, and it starts to suck in water. When it sucks in water, its mass increases, and when that mass increases, it has to grow. So it grows into these puckers. This kind of damage is irreversible, you won't get rid of it. A liner like this, if this can happen in, you know, I've probably seen it in weeks. I don't think I've seen it in days like a heat exchanger, but in weeks. And once it happens, liner, we tell people it should last 8 to 10 years. If this happens within the first couple of years, it's probably about a 5-year liner. Of course, dirt and algae is going to catch in all of these things as well, which is going to promote even further problems. And that material where it's puckered becomes very stiff and brittle, and that's where it eventually fails, it cracks. And then the liner's got to be replaced. This is a plastered pool that's been eaten away. You know, this has been literally these divots and everything, pits, paint, plaster just gets eaten away when your pH and alkalinity is low. Okay, well, low is bad, so I'm gonna make sure I stay towards the high side, so I never have a problem with low, because I don't wanna buy a new heater. High is equally as bad. That scale we keep talking about forming, it's gonna form first on metals, and metals where heat transfer takes place. It's just the nature of how water reacts. It'll also form on anything mineral second, so plaster finish, grout lines, things like that. This heater, these tubes become clogged up with calcium, and just like arteries in a body, it narrows, narrows, narrows. The heaters are all designed, and especially any heaters made in the last 10 to 12 years probably, with high efficiencies in mind. Government's mandated it. So they have that tube diameter for a reason. They have to have so many gallons per minute going through it to make sure that the heat transfer is exact. If that becomes built up with calcium, there's not enough water going through to keep the metal of the exchanger cooled as the heat transfer is occurring, and the tubes will start to warp and burst because of the calcium buildup inside. It's not that it got eaten away, it's going to be deformed because there's a tremendous amount of heat. You know, most pool heaters we have start at around a 200 or 250,000 BTU level. Most furnaces in our homes are 80 to 100,000 BTUs. So you use that when you're thinking about how much heat that thing's encountering. I've seen heat exchangers, you know, they're usually this wide, and you know, they're this high off the ground where the tubes have melted and are touching the burner tray at the bottom of the heater because of this kind of a problem. Other problems we get, these are concrete pools with tile. You can see all the scale buildup where this elevated spa spills over and the scale forms on that tile. It's a little difficult to see, but this pool is actually a gray plaster. This darker area is what the whole thing is supposed to look like. The lighter areas are scale that's built up on the plaster finish itself. So, 25 or more years ago, just north of 131st Street in Southwest Highway, there's a customer of ours, and back then we used to sell chlorine in 5-gallon containers. You probably remember Paul, right? He took care of his pool with that. He'd come down here and buy a pickup truck of them, keep them at the house. Every night he'd dump in 5 gallons of chlorine before he went to bed. That's all he ever did. Number of years, he said, you know what, the pool, I think I need you to drain it and clean it because it's just dingy and whatever. So we sent the crew out there, they drained it and started to clean it. There was over a 1/4 inch of scale on the entire inside of that pool. There isn't anything we can do to clean that. I mean, they cleaned it in terms of, it was spring, the pool hadn't been open, so okay, we'll drain it and clean it. And they went around and got the sort of the dirt and grime and stuff off, and then realized that it had this scale build up. So he ended up having to sandblast the pool and replaster it, was the only way to get rid of that scale buildup. Very, very expensive process, just because he wasn't watching. So liquid chlorine, I said it's got a high pH, right? So pH went up sky high because he's adding 5 gallons every night. And with a high pH, the scale just built up and built up. He also was on a well, which didn't help things either. So, any questions on chemical balance? Good. Okay, so this is what we all want, right? Clean, clear, sanitized water, and maybe a nice waterfall and some lighting. The importance of sanitary water. So those of us especially have had pools forever, at some point in time, your pool kind of looked like this. I know mine did when my kids are now 16 and 18. So one's going away to college in the fall and it's changing a little bit, but for many, many years, it was where everyone came. You know, the whole neighborhood, the whole town. Manhattan's not real big, literally the whole town. If we don't keep the pool sanitized, we've got all kinds of different bacterias that are gonna potentially be in that water that we don't wanna have. Bacteria can cause all these bad things that I don't need to go into. It's in your thing, I think, printed out, but know that everything from illness to discomfort to, you know, you name it, can happen if you got bacteria in the water because it's not properly sanitized. Does anyone in here use bromine in their pool? No? So bromine, it's more commonly used in spas because it has a higher tolerance to higher temperatures than chlorine, although even that is changing in recent years. But bromine is used for disinfecting. People that use bromine mostly do it because they say they don't like the chlorine smell. That's really the biggest reason. I don't like that chlorine smell. Chlorine in pools shouldn't smell. Yep.
I said, if you smell chlorine, your pool's dirty.
That's right. If you smell it, it's bad. When you walk into that Holiday Inn indoor pool and you open the door and the chlorine smacks you in the face, you probably ought to just go up to the room and close it.
A giant toilet.
You don't want to go in that. As we're talking about sanitizers, we're going to talk about how the sanitizers affect pH. People that use bromine, the pH of bromine, depending on, there are a couple different forms that can come in. The pH is between 3 and 4.8. So as we're using bromine, pH is dropping. We have to keep adding pH increasers to combat that, okay? Bromine tablets are added through floaters or erosion feeders typically. Some of you might have these things for chlorine even. So since no one has bromine, we'll move on to chlorine. Why do we use chlorine? It's effective, it works. It's the most effective sanitizer. It's relatively inexpensive in terms of sanitizers. By comparison, bromine is one of the most expensive sanitizers. It costs 60-70% more than chlorine, basically. The ideal range here between 2 and 4, okay? Our industry used to accept 5 at the higher end, but in recent years, they've dropped that to 4. So if you used to think, those of us that had pools for a long time, that 5 is good, retrain yourself. 5 is actually to a point where the industry considers that to be dangerous, hazardous. There are a lot of different ways we can get in the pool. We'll talk about those as we go on. It's available in both stabilized and unstabilized that we'll talk about. And again, it's good value. This is something that almost, and not only people as we're teaching pool school to, but in the industry. I'm involved in our industry on a national level in different forms. I interact with people on a National Service Council. We actually write the manuals that are used for training professionals in our industry. And across the country, we talk about things that I bring to light whenever I find an issue. So the sun every day, even on a cloudy day, is going to burn between 1 and 1.5 parts per million of chlorine out of your pool, no matter what. You're going to lose 1 to 1.5 parts of chlorine every day. That's why it's important that we have chlorine going into the pool every day to offset what the sun has just taken away. And this is even when, and we'll talk about stabilizer in a second, but even when we have stabilizer at a considerable range here at 50. So what is stabilizer? Stabilizer is used to reduce the effects of ultraviolet light burning off. Stabilizer actually surrounds a chlorine molecule and releases it slowly so that it isn't burned off so fast from the ultraviolet light. For most swimming pools, we should have a stabilizer level between 30 and 50 always. If you don't have a stabilizer in the pool, you're gonna go through a ton of chlorine, okay? That's something we test for everyone that brings water in. You can buy kits to do it at home as well, or strips to do it at home. If, for those of us with salt chlorine generators, we raise that up a little bit, between 50 and 80, because the product the salt generator produces is unstabilized chlorine. Most tableted chlorine has stabilizer in it, so that's why we can have it be a little bit lower. But with salt systems, we want to have it a little bit higher. How many people have heard of stabilizer before and use it in their pool? Great. If stabilizer gets over 100, pools can experience problem because the chlorine becomes locked up. It is releasing so slow that it can't effectively sanitize. We do have many pools that operate effectively at 110, 120, maybe 130. But if we find a pool that's having water quality issues, everything else is right, but the stabilizer is at 100 or more, we're gonna have to get that stabilizer level down. Stabilizer is like calcium, like TDS. The only way to get rid of it is to drain and fill with water with less stabilizer in it. There is no stabilizer in your makeup water, whether it's well or city, stabilizer doesn't exist, okay? It's only introduced into the water for our purpose relative to the chlorine. Any questions on stabilizer? So liquid chlorine, who's ever used it in their pool? Everybody, right? Probably. Referred often to pool as pool shock. It's a very inexpensive way of chlorinating a pool. Today, it's most commonly used for shock treating or opening a pool specifically. You know, 25, 30 years ago, it was actually used like jumping down the street. That was not uncommon at all, that people did that. If it is used as the only chlorine source for a pool, you need to add up to half a gallon per 10,000 gallons of water every day. And again, we're losing 1 to 1.5 parts a day. So if you're using liquid chlorine, it's a daily thing. You're going out there every day and dumping it in the pool. Remember we started at the beginning to say we want to make your life easier. So if you're using liquid, keep watching. Liquid chlorine, like we said, very high pH, 13 to 14. So if that is your only thing you're using, you're going to always be adding acid to counter it. Commercial pools that use liquid chlorine, and most of them are using just liquid chlorine because of the economics of it, they actually have, in the equipment room, they'll have a 55-gallon drum of liquid chlorine and a 55-gallon drum of muriatic acid. And they'll have pumps in there that are both pumping this all day long. The acid's countering the effects of pH as the chlorine is doing the disinfecting. Just nonstop. We, for many, many, many years, took care of the reflecting pool at Millennium Park downtown for the city, as well as the water in Laurie Gardens. And they had in the reflecting pool chlorine tank acid pumps that just kept going. Granular chlorine, who uses granular chlorine, okay? So granular chlorine's pH is not too bad, it's low, but it's not as low as some of the other products. So we do want to keep an eye on it, but we're going to see that the effects are not going to be as rapid as some of the other products. This is a stabilized chlorine, so we're going to use that 30 to 50 stabilizer level instead of 50 to 80. As we add this to the pool, we are contributing a little bit to the stabilizer level, building up over time. If we're using it daily, we're going out every day and putting about 5 ounces for 10,000 gallons of water in the pool every single day. Okay. Many people that are using it won't do it that way. They'll go and throw maybe twice that amount every other day, or 3 times that amount every third day. And anytime you get into those things, you get into these real hills and valleys. You know, you throw it in and you're gonna be sky high, probably higher than you should swim at. And then within a day and a half, you're gonna be down to nothing, and you're gonna be at a point where bacteria and algae in those dead spots are gonna start to consume the rest of the pool. Does anyone have or has had one of these guys? Watermatic was around for many years. When Polaris was a company, they were fantastic. Then Polaris was bought by Zodiac and things changed and Zodiac quit making them a few years ago. But this is the product you would use in this feeder if you have that feeder still today. There are a number of them out there. But I had one on my pool when I first built it, before I changed over to salt. And I loved it until I found salt. Any questions on granular chlorine? 1-inch cleaning tablets. So these tablets are stabilized as well. They're fed through these type of things. How many people use these floaters in their ground pool? Okay. They're not overly effective at chlorinating because it's relying on that tablet to just dissolve sitting in water. The erosion feeders here are better because the water is going through them. So it's more like the way the Grand Canyon is formed by the river running through it and breaking it down as it goes. So it's a positive way of dissolving the tablet as opposed to it just having to dissolve setting on its own. If you are using those tablets and you had good luck with them, you probably would find a little better luck out of using them in one of these kind of things. The erosion feeders do have dials to control how much water flows through them. That controls the rate at which the chlorine is fed into the pool. So you can, usually it's a matter of getting it going and dialing it in over a couple of days. And then once you find that sort of sweet spot, you just let it go. 1-inch tablets have a pH of 3. So when you're using these in whatever method that you're introducing it, your water, the pH is becoming acidic very quickly, very, very quickly. And you probably are weekly adding pH increasers to offset that. Then we move into 3-inch tablets. Our 3-inch tablets are a little bit different than 1-inch tablets or other, a little bit different than 1-inch tablets and a lot of it different than most 3-inch tablets on the market. And Tom, let them know why.
So very similar to the 1-inch tablet, it's the same, the chlorine part of it is the same makeup. What's different about these tablets are the blue speckles that you see in here. That is an algicide, okay? Nobody else is doing that. So it's for these PT multi-purpose tablets, you have the algicide built into them as well as water clarifiers. Water clarifiers take smaller particles that the filter can't grab. It bunches them up, makes them bigger so that the filter can filter them out easier. So you're doing everything that any other chlorine tablet would do in terms of sanitizing the water. You are preventing algae growth and you are clarifying the water all with one tablet. And these are going to be used in the same types of feeders that the 1-inch tablets are using. You can put them in a floater. Once again, not as effective as your erosion feeders that you regulate the amount of water flow that flows through it to regulate how much chlorine is transferred into the water. These are not to be used 3-inch pucks. I know some people do it, but they should not be used in skimmer applications. We will talk about those, I think, next. So these will be used in your the erosion feeders or the floater.
The 1-inch tablets too, you should not put in through a skimmer. Mostly because both these products have this very, very low acid level to them. When you put them in through your skimmer, you're creating a very highly concentrated chlorine that's extremely acidic. And that is going straight through all your equipment. The skimmer body itself, that is plastic, is being compromised over time as a result. The face of the pool outside that skimmer, if your pump ever shuts off, that product that it creates is very heavy and it builds up and the skimmer flows out and down the face of the pool. And those puckers we showed on the liners earlier, it's very common that when we're replacing liners, we see those puckers under the skimmers because people are throwing tablets in there because they think it's an effective way of doing it. I've also got some people that throw them in a pump basket. And same thing. I mean, you're going to destroy your pump, your filter, your heater, all that stuff. The MPT tablets are stabilized as well. So we're in that 30 to 50 range on stabilizer because it is a stabilized product, and as you use it, it will slowly contribute to that stabilizer level increasing over time.
Sometimes my chlorine feeder doesn't consistently chlorinate the water though. It'll fluctuate. I don't know how to describe it, but I'll bring them to get tested on the chlorine.
Right.
So that's why I'll stick it in the skimmer basket the furthest away from the filter. I'll stick maybe like one in there. You're telling me I really shouldn't really do that.
No, and the fluctuations really are, well, there are two things that can cause it. One, as your filter gets dirty, the flow characteristics change,
Okay.
and the flow through the chlorinator will change as the pressure increases, decreases, depending on its location.
Okay.
The other thing is that it's usually more environmental factors that cause a depletion. So you got your dial set, and you know, like,
Yeah.
hey, I got it set at 4, and that keeps me at 3, and I'm good. And then, middle of the summer, I've had a lot of high heat, a lot of use, maybe a couple thunderstorms,
Mhm.
and that's caused it to deplete. And because this is still at 4, it takes it a long time to come back, and in that downtime is when you might run into some kind of a problem. And this product's been out for a few years now. It's an NST tablet. It was created out west. We always hear about droughts, right? And how they, in the drought areas, when they're under drought in Arizona, California, they cannot fill swimming pools. It's banned. So if their pool has a high stabilizer level and they're having water quality issues, they don't have the ability of draining the water and filling it with more to make up for it, because it's against the law. So Pool Life created these NST tablets that it's an alternative to the other tablets, but the benefit is it's non-stabilized. It's not going to contribute to the stabilizer level. It does have a high pH, so we're going to add reducers or acid if we're using these. And then, Tom, go ahead and tell them about the aspect of.
Yeah, so with these tablets, like Dan said, if you struggle with a high stabilizer level, and we recognize it here at the store, and we have you, let's say, drain a little bit of water out, you're not gonna drain all of your water out. You're gonna drain some, your level's gonna come down some, and just below 100 parts per million. You would not want to continue to feed the chlorine that you've been using that has that stabilizer that is contributing to that level. So that's where this is a perfect product to use in that situation, because you already have enough stabilizer in there. You're already probably just below where you're supposed to be, and you want to add something. You don't want to add more product to that to force you to have to drain again. It's 1 stick per 10,000 gallons of water directly into the skimmer. Okay, this is like what I was talking about. There are some sticks that you can use in the skimmer. This is one of them, and it has to go in the skimmer. You would not put these in that same feeder that maybe you have that feeder or your floater. They can't go in there, and it's actually very dangerous if you do. They need to go into the skimmer designed for that application. Okay, they only dissolve when water's flowing past them. That's why they're able to be used in the skimmer. Pump shuts off. These form a hard shell over them and stop dissolving, whereas those 3-inch hockey pucks that some of you guys I know are using in your skimmers, those will continue to dissolve no matter if there's water flow past them or not, causing the problems Dan was talking about, the puckering underneath the liner by the skimmer.
And then another product that Pool Life has had for many, many years is their Bright Stick, which has really all the qualities of the MPT tablet, the algicides, the clarifiers, and so forth in it. But it is made to be a skimmer application product, just like the NST tablet. So you can throw these right in your skimmer. You don't need to have a separate feeder. Erosion feeders can tend to be a little bit of a maintenance issue. If they got little tubes, the tubes can break. They can clog up depending. The lid O-rings. This unit here in the middle here is notorious to have the O-ring swell, and then the lid is real miserable to get it on and off because it binds. But the Bright Sticks, as opposed to the NST tabs that have a pH of 12, Bright Sticks are like your other tablets. They've got a low pH, so you're still going to be adding your increasers routinely to make sure your water's not acidic. Yes?
You try adding a combination of like half and half of the 3 pH sticks and then half of the 12?
In terms of the NST and the Bright Sticks,
Or some
I
combination?
wouldn't. Only for fear of bad things happen when you mix chemicals, and if inadvertently someone were to interchange either the baskets, or there's a little bit of residue of one and you drop the opposite one in there, it can actually you could actually have explosions from that. To the point of any of these erosion feeders that we've been showing here. For best results, add to a new clean floater or feeder. I don't like people even changing brands with these things because of a lot of the chlorine in our industry is coming from overseas. A lot of the chemicals are coming from overseas, and there's so much stuff in there that we don't even know what's in it that can react badly with the plastics of these things. Absorb the chemicals on the inside, and even though it looks clean, you could drop a tablet in there that doesn't react well with something that was in the last composition, and I have seen damage caused by these blowing up. It's like a pipe bomb in the backyard, honestly. A lid that went through the side of a garage, through the siding and through the side of the garage. So, I don't like mixing any chlorines like that, mostly because of that. That's also why, we talk about not mixing chemicals before putting them in a pool, not dissolving, pre-dissolving. Well, not that many years ago, but the chemical producers in our country ran into a problem because you had to add chlorine to your pool. And they say dilute in a bucket of water and pour in your pool. And we all have a bucket at home, right? And then the bucket goes in the shed or the garage, and then the next week you go out and you need to add acid. And it says dilute this powder in a bucket of water and throw it in your pool. And you grab that same bucket you had chlorine in and you put the acid in. Chlorine and acid together is what they just dropped in Syria, whoever dropped it. It's the mustard gas that was used back in the war as it's banned. That's what comes out of that. So the producers, the high-level producers of chemicals in our country went to a refining process to eliminate the need for pre-dissolving. If you ever buy a package of something that tells you to pre-dissolve, you really want to think about what it is, where it came from, and what other stuff is going into the pool as doing it, because the high-quality stuff in the country doesn't do that. But there is a lot of stuff coming in, like I said, from overseas and being sold in some of the, club stores and things like that, and you'll see it'll say pre-dissolve on a lot of them. So, any questions on the Bright Sticks or the MST tips? Okay, salt chlorine generators. So some of us know what these are, some of us don't. I've had one I set on my pool. I started with that Watermatic powder feeder. I switched to this. For like 8 years I've been using salt in my pool. Essentially you add salt. It's food grade. Pool salt is what it's called, but it's food grade. You can take it out of the bag and put it in your salt shaker. Salt to the water. The water creates a salinity in the pool that is typically between 3,000 and 4,000 parts per million. By comparison, the ocean is about 50,000 parts per million. So the salinity in the pool is less than 10% of the ocean. The sodium, in conjunction with hydrogen and oxygen that makes up the water, passes through these cells. And there are plates in the cell that current is applied to, and as that water passes through, it converts the sodium, hydrogen, and oxygen into sodium hypochlorite, which is liquid chlorine. The chlorine goes out into the pool, it disinfects, it sanitizes, it oxidizes. The hydrogen and oxygen is given up either through oxidation into the atmosphere or reconverting back into water, and the sodium is left behind, so the salt never goes away. So once you establish your salt level, it's there, except with some of these other things we mentioned, dilution. If your pool is drained in the winter, if you have a lot of rain, something like that. It is creating liquid chlorine, so we've got that same high pH. So we are always adding acid to drop that pH back down to normal levels. It's always going. So for my purpose, I put that variable speed pump in, whatever, 6 years ago now, I think, 7 maybe. That pump's running 24 hours a day. I'm producing chlorine 24 hours a day. So where I've been talking about these highs and lows, I don't have any highs and lows. It's like a flatline chlorine level. It's proven, I didn't want, it's been around for a long time, and actually when I built my pool, one of the manufacturer reps, she kept coming in and saying, when are you gonna put salt in your pool? I said, I don't want it. I like this Watermatic thing I got, it works great. Next year, when you put salt in your, she finally dropped one on my desk. She put it on your pool, would you please? If you hate it, throw it away. And it was probably the smartest thing she ever did, because I immediately started seeing the benefits. I no longer had to fill any kind of a chlorine thing. I'm no longer buying the powders or sticks or tablets that you're otherwise buying. The water has a softer, silkier feel to it. I wear contacts. I can actually swim in my pool underwater and open my eyes, and it does nothing to my contacts. The water, it's interesting, it's slightly more buoyant. I can actually lay on my back in the pool without a float. It's kind of weird. Not like it's gel or anything, but it just, salt water does it. If you've ever been in the ocean, you probably have noticed you can float very easily. With the aspect of this high pH thing, oh, well, let's go into this. So with the salt system, we do, when you add salt to the water has the potential of being more aggressive. Anyone into boating at all? Boat motors, if they're going in the ocean, use different components. Stainless steel props as opposed to aluminum or steel props, because salt has an aggressive quality to it. When we add salt to a pool, it increases the aggressiveness slightly of the pool. So we just make sure that we're staying in some of these ranges we've already talked about. pH again, 7.4, 7.6, right? One of the things that we want to make sure, and those of us that have got salt systems in here, you don't want to have your chlorine higher than 5 for a prolonged period of time. The combination of chlorine over 5 with the salt makes that water extremely aggressive, and you can have some damaging aspects to it. You shouldn't have the chlorine above 5 anyway, because it's truly not considered safe to swim, but a lot of people just kind of look at it and go, oh, plenty of chlorine, I'm not going to worry about it, I'm good. And not only can it be harmful to us being in the pool, but when we're using salt, you can have some other bad things happen otherwise. We're going to use muriatic acid if we're using salt to lower pH as opposed to powdered pH reducers. And there are a couple different products we can shop with. Salt systems do not operate when the water's cold. So right now, if you're starting your pool up, I just looked today at a bunch of pools we've got running that we monitor remotely, and they're all hovering, if they're not heating it, somewhere in the 63 to 67 degree range. Most of those are not going to be generating chlorine out of their salt systems. So during that cold weather time, those people, for the week or 2 or 3, they're going to typically use bright sticks in the skimmer, just to have something going, so there's some sanitizing going on while they're using the salt system. That's what I do with mine until you know, the pool's usually warm. As I said, these pools are not heated, and they're 63, 67 already, even though it snowed a week or 10 days ago. So by next week, especially after this week, they're going to be cranking out chlorine out of these things, no problem. When water is cold, all these salt systems will tell you how much salt's in the pool, because you gotta have, like I said, 3,000 to 4,000 parts to get to generate. When the water is cold, the salt system will not display an accurate salt reading. And if you have water tested, you bring it into our store, or you use some product at home to test it, it's not going to have an accurate reading. We have to wait until the water is above 65 degrees before we can test for salt. It's just the nature of it. If we try to treat beforehand, it reads too low, and we're going to put salt in, and then once the water warms up, we're going to find we're too high. And the only way to get rid of salt is to drain and fill with fresh water. In these systems, you change how much chlorine is produced by increasing essentially the voltage that goes to this thing. They call it a percentage of feet. They'll have an adjustment on it. This one actually has 1% increments. You can go from 1% to 100%. You know, with my pool running all the time, for many years, I set it at 70%, and that was pretty stable for me. Worked fine. Now, we have, for a number of years, been installing chemical automation systems with all the pools we build and significantly renovate. So this device actually monitors pH and monitors essentially your chlorine level. It's connected to the salt system, and it also has a small tank of a muriatic acid solution and a pump on it, similar to those commercial pools I mentioned earlier. If we set this at 7.5 for pH, when that pH goes to 7.51, it injects into the system ounces of acid to instantly counter it. If we get, the salt cell is typically set at 100%, so it's running on and off when it needs it. So the system's detecting the chlorine level, and if we have a heavy bather load, it turns the salt system on to help offset that. If we have a storm come through, we have the erratic weather that we tend to have, it's automatically adjusting for most of that on its own. So my system, I actually can graph my pH and chlorine levels, and it really, my pH goes from 7.5 to 7.4, 7.5, 7.4, 7.5, 7.4 all summer long. And what it is when it hit 7.51, it injected a small amount of acid, dropped at 7.4. Over time, maybe a day or so later, it'll be back 7.5, it'll pump just a small amount again. And it just maintains it perfectly for us. With salt systems, we talked about sequestering agents earlier and how you can add them to the water to help prevent staining and scale and all these things. With salt systems, the addition of sequestrants really help to prolong this cell life. We have a product called Cell Extend that was actually designed really with ease in mind. It's a product that you have once a month if you have a salt system, where a lot of sequestering agents otherwise are once a week. So Cell Extend is kind of cool that it makes it a little bit easier by doing it just once a month. This is what some of the different cells look like, and this is the scale that can form it. We don't keep our water balance right, which you want to do anyway. And by adding the Cell Extend, it helps to prevent these things from happening as well. Salt cells may need to be cleaned. Those of you that have salt cells, I think I printed this page in the handout. On our website, we pulled most of the major manufacturers' instructions on cleaning salt cells, and you can download it from there. Every salt cell is a little different, and you want to follow the instructions that manufacturer give for what they recommend for that, so we put them online to try to help those of you that have them know when to do it.
I was gonna say, you need to buy a separate end cap kit in order to clean it, because
Well, you do and you don't.
can't stand up with that plug with the screw, because of
There
the weight
are
on it.
different ways of doing it, and there are different salt cells as well. This salt cell actually comes out completely from its vessel, if you will, and this one you can easily do in a bucket. I do mine, well, honestly, I haven't cleaned my salt cell in here. My salt cell never needs to be cleaned. It just, I mean, if you keep your water balanced and you use the Cell Extend.
But if you read the
I don't need it.
instructions, they tell you to clean it once a month.
And that's a preventative thing, because if they tell you to do it, if there is a scale formation, you're gonna get rid of
Take
it.
all that plumbing apart just to clean the cell, right?
Well, they actually come out very easily. There are two unions that you undo real easy, and
No,
I mean,
well, I know, but.
but I inspect mine periodically, but I have never, I can't say never, my first system, I thought it needed to be cleaned because of the chlorine production. It was actually because of phosphates in my pool, but I cleaned it then, but it's never needed it. The cleaning process usually is something that takes about 15 to maybe 30 minutes. All right. Anyone have questions on salt? Okay, so when do we shock a pool? Hopefully we don't do it like that.
Start of season. Right?
Well, start of season for sure, but truly, the reason we shock a pool is if ammonia and nitrogen are introduced into the water, chlorine cannot get rid of them. They combine with the chlorine molecules and form combined chlorine, as a sort of a loose term. Chloramines is the technical term, but combined chlorine is what it refers to them as. Combined chlorine is hazardous. It is not an effective sanitizer. That is what causes your chlorine smell that we talked about earlier. It definitely irritates eyes, skin, is not something you want to do. In a commercial pool, if your combined chlorine level is greater than 0.2 parts per million, the state will shut you down. So you really can't have any combined chlorine in your pool to have a safe swimming environment. Mathematically speaking, if you have combined chlorine in the pool, you need to add free chlorine at an amount that is 10 times the level of the combined to get rid of that combined. So if we have a combined level of 1 part per million, we need to add free chlorine in a volume of 10 parts per million to get rid of that one. After that reaction is done, there's no chlorine left in the water. That's what we call breakpoint chlorination. So technically, when do you need to shock? Anytime you have combined chlorine in the water. And how much do you need to shock? Free chlorine, depending on the product you're adding, they all have different amounts of free chlorine that it creates. And you need to do the math to figure out how much of it you need to add, right? If your goal is to have a trouble-free pool, and you don't wanna have to try to make sure you're doing all of this right, shock your pool once a week, and you're not gonna have a problem. So, I mean, this sounds like a lot, and it is easy to mess up. Even veterans that have been in the industry for 10, 15 years have difficulty doing the math, depending on the product you're using, to know exactly what they need to add. And during that time, nobody's going in the pool. So if you gotta put in 10 or 15 parts per million of chlorine in the pool, no one's swimming. So again, how much is it worth to have the pool on that day that you want to go jump in, or that evening when you got home and said, you know what, I'm done, I'm jumping in the pool. Oh, no, I just shocked it because we got combined chlorine. If you get into a routine of shocking every week at a time that is convenient around your schedule for using the pool, you're not gonna run into problems with mountain. When and why? Lightning releases nitrogen in the atmosphere. So these storms that came through earlier today with lightning and all our pools that are open, you just got a bunch of nitrogen dumped in your pool. And if you have chlorine in your pool, that you should, that chlorine is reacting with that nitrogen as we speak and combining with it. So when we go home, or maybe tomorrow morning, what should we do to our pool, do you think? Yeah. So anytime that we have lightning storms or rain, even without lightning, because if we have trees around or we got a deck, there are things like this that end up on our deck. I got a mallard, male and female, that nest in the arborvitae around my pool every spring, and they have babies, and inevitably they're in my pool, and yeah, it's cute as can be, and I wish I had a gun, I'd shoot them. Because frogs are terrible too, yeah. So all of that stuff carries contaminants in, and it can be bacteria, or it can be, things that are gonna react and form combined chlorine.
Plus they always fly by and drop.
And they fly and drop, right, or they're on the deck, and then the rain washes that in as it's raining. So anytime there's a storm, anytime it rains, or here's that, you had a party and you have a bunch of people over and in the pool, just make it automatic, go out and shock the pool, okay? So you're gonna do it once a week, automatic, and you're gonna do it after any of these events, automatic. If you do that, you're not gonna run into a problem. With what you were describing earlier with your chlorinators going along and then all of a sudden it's not.
Yeah.
If you
sometimes.
get in the habit of doing the shocking once a week, it will help to get you more on a steady level as well.
How
Sorry,
do I okay, never mind.
what's that?
And
How do you do it?
it's right there.
We're prepared. So how do I do it? What do I use? There are a lot of answers to that question, okay? And to that point, Shoxidizer is a product that we love because, see right here, you can swim 15 minutes after throwing it in the pool. It's awesome because you can just throw it in. We have it in 1 pound bags, so it's pretty easy. You just, I need 2 pounds of it. If it's a pound, 10 pounds,
Yep.
Is it a 4-way shock? It's got the flocculent?
It's like a 3-way shock, so it helps buffer the pH, it
Right,
clarifies the
stabilize.
water, and it adds some non-chlorine and chlorine shocking properties.
But because you can swim 15 minutes later, it's great to use all the time or to have on hand if there's a need. You get it's Friday, a storm comes through, and Saturday you're having a party. So you have to go out and shock tomorrow, because we just talked about that. If you're gonna use liquid chlorine, you're gonna use some of these other products, you're not gonna swim them all. Shoxidizer, you can. Another product we got, OxyBrite, is an oxygen-based shock. It too will allow you to swim 15 minutes later. Same way as Shoxidizer. Turbo Shock is an extremely powerful shock, again, sold in 1 pound bags. This product, you won't swim 50 minutes later. This is, you're gonna do it at night when you're done with the pool and wait until the chlorine level comes back down the next day or maybe even 2 days later, depending on what's going on, before you're gonna get in the pool. And then liquid chlorine, just like the Turbo Shock, you're gonna throw that in the pool and it's gonna shoot the chlorine up real high for a prolonged period of time while it's doing its job, and you're not gonna be swimming right away while you're doing it. They're all effective and they all work, but they have different purposes in terms of what your needs are. The liquid chlorine that is sold in our industry, we sell it in the highest percentage of available chlorine that you can buy in a 1 gallon, 12.5%. There is a range in that, ranges from 8 to 10 to 12.5. And although it doesn't seem like much, that's what you're paying for, is at 12.5%. So be sure you check your bottle if you're concerned about those things. If you were to buy a $3 gallon of 8% versus a $4 gallon of 12%, you're getting over 50% more chlorine for a third more money. Okay, so anyway, just know that that's out there. Bleach, through the years, I've had a lot of people, I buy the generic dual bleach and use that. Bleach is usually 4 to 5% and has a lot of other stuff in it that you really don't want in your pool. It's gonna cause cloudy water, it's gonna add all kinds of other stuff. Okay, and then lastly, algicide. So when do we use algicide? Remember we started off this thing talking about microns? Okay, whatever, microns. I don't need to add it because I don't have algae. Remember what we said, how small algae is? Awesome,
They would save on that.
Right. So algae spores are 5 microns. There is always algae in your pool, always. It's just you can't see it. A shot glass worth of water needs to have 1 million spores of algae before it's going to be visible. Okay? So that statement is incorrect because all pools have algae. You need to keep adding algicide routinely to keep killing it off and keep it under the threshold at which it is no longer a safe environment, and also the visibility of it. I mean, algae, no one wants to see it, but it also creates some factors in terms of safety in the pool. Chlorine kills algae, so I don't need it. It's another misconception. Chlorine is an algistat. It helps to reduce its breeding, its multiplying, its growth, but it doesn't kill it. Unless you're up over 10 parts per million, that's when chlorine becomes an algicide and kills it. So if you're not adding algicide weekly and you're keeping your chlorine at 2 to 4, the algae is slowly growing. You get a storm come through like what came through this afternoon, and tomorrow you can start to have algae growth in the pool. It's going to be overwhelming. And if you instead use algicides weekly, you're keeping it at bay that storm's not going to cause that to happen. So here, neighbors were beginning to talk about the algae problem in Bill's pool. Don't be Bill. We've got a few different products on the shelf, but Tom said I can't show any of them. No, truly, this is a product that for the 30 years I've been here, we've been using algicide.
Yeah, so what's different about this is it not only kills the algae spores, but it also has what's called a wetting agent. So algae is able to grow and thrive because it's able to attach onto the pool wall, and it's protecting itself from the chlorine, from the algicides, and so on. So what algimycin has in it is the wetting agent, and it prevents it from grabbing a hold of the liner after you brush it off. So anytime you get an algae problem or you have an algae issue, you should either vacuum the pool or brush the algae, and then you add this product along with chlorine likely, and this will help prevent it from reattaching itself onto the pool wall or the floor, trying to protect itself. It also has water clarifiers in it, so oftentimes when you have algae, you have cloudy water. So it'll take those, once again, just like some of those chlorine tablets that we have, takes those particles, bunches them up, makes them bigger, so that the filter can filter them out. It is best, just like this gentleman does, it's best, with any algicide, best to be used as a maintenance product. So you add an initial dosage, and then you add every week a few ounces per 10,000 gallons of pool water, because it's much easier to prevent algae than it is to get rid of it. And once again, we have a very short window of being able to use our pools in this climate here. So if you can always have a nice, clean, clear, algae-free pool, it's just easier, it makes more sense just to do it as a maintenance.
But I worry a little bit about the, health benefits of or not benefits, but like, do you have to wait a certain amount of time? If I had to add a whole bottle of algicide to my pool, before you swim in it? Does it biodegrade after a certain amount of time, or am I absorbing it, or?
No, with the Algemycin 2000, I usually tell people maybe an hour. But the algicide, when it's in the water, it stays in the polymer, causes it to stay in the water for a week. And it's not elevating any levels like chlorine where it becomes unsafe or anything like that. The only reason I say an hour is just give it a chance to distribute a little bit before you're in there. You probably didn't even have to wait that long. You could probably jump in 15 minutes later or whatever. I know I've been in my pool after putting algicide in. That Sunday I'm doing my pool stuff and putting algicide in as part of it. As soon as I'm done, and especially when it's hot, I'm in the pool. I cut the grass, I do the pool, and I'm in it. And I know I've thrown the algicide in just before going in. Have any of you ever seen this kind of pink in your skimmer baskets or pump baskets? No? Good. Know if you get this pink, or this is actually white, it's kind of hard to give a picture of the white water mold, but pink slime and white water mold or pink and white algae, they're really bacterias. And where algae is always present in water, bacterias are not. And these pink and white bacterias are introduced. The ducks I pointed out earlier definitely can bring pink bacteria in the pool. Now, chlorine at normal levels and everything else we're doing will keep these bacteria from being able to do anything. But if we happen to hit a valley for some reason in our treatment process, and the bacteria gets in, that pink bacteria will get in and it will take hold, and you will have, it's basically impossible to get rid of. Forevermore, all you're doing is controlling it. This is why it's so important. These two things are part of the reason why it's so important to be on a routine of shocking, keeping my pH and everything right. A duck flies into my pool, I don't have to worry about it. It's not going to hurt anything because I know my levels are right. But if I'm at a low spot and that bacteria takes hold, we do have a product called Vanquish. What you have to do in trying to treat it initially is raise your chlorine above 10 parts per million, add the Vanquish. The Vanquish will kill what bacteria comes in contact with. Problem is that this stuff likes to live in the dark. So it's going to be on the underside of your ladders. It's going to be in your piping, in your filter, in your pump. And it just is miserable to get rid of. When people get into having this, we end up, their chlorine is always at 4. We want to keep it at the high side. You're adding Vanquish weekly to keep it at bay, and you will be able to do that, but it just becomes another one of those things you got to deal with, where everything we've been talking about tonight is about not getting that to that point. So if you keep on your shocking every week, you keep on shocking after storms, you add your products the way we've been talking about, that duck lands, if it happens, and not all ducks have bacteria in them. Don't think that, they're all that way, but they are pretty filthy animals, and if they did, your pool's going to take care of it on its own, and you won't get it back. And the last product we're going to talk about here is Endure. So Endure is a product that if you use it in your pool, you will not get algae ever. Following everything that you're supposed to do. Algae is able to grow in the water because of carbon dioxide. Right, all plants need carbon dioxide to live. And Endure essentially removes carbon dioxide from the water. So in my pool, hard to see in the picture, but up here in the top I've got 2 natural stone waterfalls. And in the top of those waterfalls are little catch basins, about 3 by 3, and there's about this much water in them. Well, when the waterfalls are running, that fills up and it spills down, creates a waterfall. When they're off, which is almost always unless we're out there, that water's sitting stagnant. From the time I built it for the first 3, 4, maybe 5 years, in the middle of summer I would always notice a little haze of algae under the waterfalls on the wall right there on my liner. And I'd go out and I would find that those basins, which are natural stone, would have a mat of algae in them. And I could take a putty knife and scrape it off. I'd get a gallon of chlorine and pour it in each one and let that sit for a while, and then I'd go and scrub it, and then I'd shop vac it out and clean it all up, and it usually was good for the rest of the summer. Then I started using Endure. And since I started using Endure, I don't see any algae anywhere, in those catch basins, in the pool, anywhere. You know, those catch basins, because it's such shallow water, the sun beats in it, and if the pool is, I gotta admit, when I'm swimming, it's 88, 90 degrees, because I hate cold water. Cold water is 87, I mean, yeah, you're right. So, in those basins, that water's gotta be like 100 degrees in the summer, and the algae just grabs hold. I have them cycle on once a day to flush them out, but that's not enough. It just gets too hot in there. The Endure, it disappears. The product, I mean, because of what it does, and knowing the science behind it, we actually offer an algae-free guarantee to any pool that's using this product and following our stuff we've been talking about all night. If you were to ever get algae, we'll give you whatever you need to get rid of it. We've been doing that for years. How much stuff do we have to give away? None. We don't run into problems with it. It can't, because there's no carbon dioxide in the water. If you make sure your Endure level is proper, it can't live. It'd be like putting you in a vacuum with no oxygen. You're not gonna survive. Does it work? So these 6 pools, a handful of years ago out in central Ohio, they were left uncovered all winter long. This pool had used Endure through the summer. In the springtime when I opened my pool, not that it's perfect, I mean, no pool is in the spring, but compared to what it was prior to Endure, it's night and day. Night and day. I gotta deal with the sediment, you know, the silt and all that kind of stuff, but I'm not, you know, I was opening the pool and it's thick green soup. And you throw chemicals at it for a couple days and let it filter, and you get ahead of it. I open it up, I can see to the bottom every year.
I use a product called Yellow Out, you know, before you guys come. And I throw my robot in there, you know, my turbo, and he vacuums and scrubs the walls and does all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you add the chlorine after that, and it does all types of algae. So
Yeah, Yellow Out will kill algae.
Kill
like that,
everything
sure.
in there. Yeah, then you guys come and add the chlorine and with the
Yep.
opening kit and
Yep.
whatnot.
If you're using Endure, you wouldn't need the Yellow Out.
Okay.
Endure is a product that you add once, it doesn't go away. It's like stabilizer, it's like calcium, it doesn't go
So
away.
once a week treatment?
No, you add it once, typically in the spring of the year.
Okay.
You establish your level and then it's there. The spring next year, you may need to replenish it depending. We've had a lot of pools this year that we've been opening that have not needed any. That the range is 30 to 50, and we're opening pools that are at 35, 40 after last summer.
I mean, what that does, it does is what Yellow Out does is it brings those particles together so they can be collected, you know, because I mean,
Right, right. But the key is, and this is where Endure works, is not ever having the algae to begin with.
Right.
And that's the difference. Yellow Out is treating algae just like algomycin
Right,
treats algae,
well,
where
right.
Endure is preventing it from the beginning. So when we do add Endure, it does, if we're adding it only at the time it's added, cause the pH to go up, so we give people a prescription. You're gonna put so much Endure and so much acid in, so much Endure, so much acid, 3 doses, and then your levels are gonna be there and you'll not have a problem with algae also.
What is it made out of?
It's the technical chemical is a borate. But it's you know, we do weekly maintenance for a lot of people where our guys go out and maintain the pools, and the vast majority of those people are on the Endure program. Again, it's a matter of just not wanting to have those headaches. Endure is great in the valleys of our treatments. You know, if we're adding products where we're not, like my pool, just a flat line, chlorine's always good, pH always good. We're adding something that's got a little bit of fluctuation. We don't have the chemical automation like I do. Your chlorine tablet in a feeder is gonna be good, but you get a rainstorm, it's gonna dip. You and come back up. And that dip is when the Endure is covering you. Because when it dips, that's when the algae in the pool, which is always there otherwise, is going to potentially breed.
So with the Endure, you don't need all these other products other than chlorine?
No, you still do.
You need the
You still
outside
do.
and the other stuff?
Yeah, you still do. It's not gonna alleviate any of it, but it's gonna be that layer of protection again for those low spots in your treatment process.
But you need everything else too.
Yeah, it's a whole picture of what's going on. There are other things we didn't talk about tonight, like mineral purifiers that are another layer of protection. You can do Nature 2, some of us have those, that introduce silver and copper in the water is another layer of protection. I've got that too. I got a salt system, I got a Nature 2 system, I use the Endure, I use Algicide every week, I shock every week. But I guarantee you, come my pool anytime all summer long, and you can jump right in, fit my kids away.
Does the salt system eliminate some of the chemicals that you have to put in there?
Yeah, it eliminates your baseline chlorine. So it's gonna, if you're using tablets, you won't use tablets anymore. If you're using powders, you know, for routine or liquid, it replaces all of that.
So do you feel it's less expensive than your chlorine?
Yeah, by far. For multiple reasons. So here's the thing, and this sounds kind of silly, but I told you I had the Watermatic chlorine feeder before, used granular chlorine. So I started out with a certain amount of chlorine at home, and inevitably I would run out of chlorine at home, and I'm surrounded by it all day, and I would forget to bring it home. And I told you Sunday was my day, right? Manhattan is about a 45-minute drive from here. So I was finding myself on Sundays going to the hardware store in town, because there's nothing in Manhattan, it's farm country, and buying chlorine from Ace Hardware to put in my pool because I was out. It's generating chlorine in your backyard, all on its own. So you never have to fill anything, you never have to remember to add something. It just takes care of it. And the quality of the water in terms of the feel of the water has just been the biggest thing. And that's not just my experience. People, we've installed salt systems for hundreds of people, and any of them that we talk to after the fact say the water feels so much better.
Another question we have 2 dogs, and of course we try to discourage them as much, to stay away from the pool and not drink out of it, but is there any product that we should definitely not use if our dogs are gonna be drinking out of the pool? I just like I get worried about that.
No, I mean, it's all relative to the levels. You know, obviously if you just shock the pool and the dogs drink it, it may cause them some grief, but my daughter, who is 16 now, you'll see her here in the summer at times, she works during the summer. When she was little, it was hard. It was funny, my daughter and myself can tell there's salt in the water, you know, like if you get in your mouth and you can taste it. My wife and my son can't. My wife's Irish, and my son has her complexion. My daughter's more me, German, crotchety. I guess we just don't, you know, there's a difference there. But my daughter, I would always, when she was little, stop drinking the water, you know, cut it out. But I mean, in general, under normal levels, it's not going to hurt them. But if you're shocking it, I would try and prevent them from doing it. Odds are, dogs are smart. Animals are smart. They do it once. They're probably not going to drink out of it.
One of them is
So, if you have more questions, we're around. Ask any of us. Grab another glass of wine, some more snacks.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you.
Great to see you. Thank you so much for coming.